You want me to put that on my todger?
Harry's wife. Rude. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Tell me, let me know what Mark Wahlberg has been doing with his neighbour. You can't. There's probably no information about it. Why not let me in on what Prince William has been doing in relation to one of his neighbours? Oh, you're not able to. There's no information about it. I know. Why don't you tell me what Gwyneth Paltrow has been up to with regard to her neighbours? Any information about it? No. In fact, you'd be hard-pressed to find much about the neighbours of the famous individuals on this planet. There'll be a smattering here and there, but for the most part, you don't know about it. Why? Mostly, people aren't interested. But moreover, the people concerned don't do anything to ensure that it's reported on. That's in terms of not thrusting it through a PR agency to talk about them in relation to their neighbours, and furthermore, not behaving like a pair of arseholes so that the neighbours don't like you so that they move to talk about you. Even where a famous person might be a bit of a twat, it's likely that their neighbour isn't going to go and talk to the press about it because they think, well, at the end of the day, I'll just get on with my life and we don't really have to have too much to do with one another. Indeed, often in these places, they live on such huge estates, you barely have anything to do with your neighbour, don't even see them, can't even smell them. And therefore, even though you might think that they're a bit of a turd, you don't have too much to do with them, so it's not an issue. But with Harry's wife, and also Harry, they're just not liked. They're just simply not liked. Not liked by people, not liked by the media, and not liked by the people that read the media. This all means that where they do something which is unpleasant, you can bet your bottom dollar it's going to be reported on and people will want to read about it. And that's the state that Harry and Harry's wife have got themselves into as a consequence of their own behaviour and their rampant unpopularity. Where something does happen, which is not particularly pleasant, it'll be reported on, and there's plenty of people who want to examine it. This, of course, is yet again another collateral consequence of her narcissism, the way that she has behaved. She's essentially caused a situation where those chickens of authenticity are coming home to roost. The Scottish Daily Express with Ben Borland tells us, neighbour rudely snubbed by Harry's wife lifts lid on local tragedy. What has she been up to now? Did the neighbour pop round saying, I've made some lovely cupcakes? And she said, fuck that shit, I'm not eating them, my cupcakes are better than you. Or perhaps the neighbour popped round and said, I'd like to borrow a cup of sugar. And she said, the only sugars I'm interested in are the online trolls. Go away before I set the dogs on you, you smelly individual. Or perhaps somebody popped round and said, I'd like to introduce myself, I'm your neighbour. And she thinks, you're not important enough, so clear off before I ensure that the gate guard tases you. Well, US Navy veteran Frank McGinty, aged 88, was told, they're not interested, when he popped round with some local history films for his neighbours. An 88-year-old whose local knowledge was snubbed by Prince Harry and Harry's wife hasn't let the brusque response from his neighbours put him off his stride. What fresh nonsense and disgraceful behaviour is this? An 88-year-old neighbour, he dodders round and he's trying to be nice, and what does he get? He gets a snubbing from these two dickheads. Frank McGinty, an accountant and author, recently told how he had called at the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's home on the Riven Rock estate to share some films he had made on the history of the area. What a kind and lovely gesture. It's just similar to the fact that he's been on holiday and wants to show you his snaps of wherever he's been, but this is even more relevant. This is the history of the area. You've moved in recently. I'm going to tell you how it is. He said, I have a big house next to Harry and Harry's wife's property, and I live in the guest house while renting the main house out on Airbnb. Harry and Harry's wife live on Old McCormick property, and I went up to their gate with the films on a CD, but they weren't interested. The gate guy turned me away and wouldn't take the film, just saying they're not interested. I was trying to be neighbourly. If they were interested in the neighbourhood, I've got a lot of information. Now, it might be that Mr. McGinnity is an old bore, and you're not really going to find what he has to tell you interesting. But most people, particularly those, of course, that would have emotional empathy, would at least show an interest, trying to be neighbourly, perhaps enduring it for an hour or so, even though you might not be too interested in it. Or you might actually find it fascinating and be delighted that Mr. McGinnity has taken the time to tell you more about the place in which you live. It's evident that the gate guy must have rung up to the house and said, we've got some old guy here who wants to share his films about the history of the area. And Harry's wife, of course, dismissively and haughtily had thought, I don't want some smelly old guy that stinks of cabbage and piss coming into my house, boring the arse off me. I'm the person that bores people. I'm the one that sends people into catatonic states, not the other way around. Tell him to fuck off, we're not interested. And accordingly, Mr. McGinnity was told, we're not interested, and was sent on his way. Mr. McGinnity, who served in the US Navy and now runs a successful accountancy firm with offices in Santa Barbara and Los Angeles, added, we don't see them very much around here. And he admitted he was baffled as to why the couple had chosen to move to the quiet enclave, 90 miles from the bright lights of Hollywood and Beverly Hills, saying, it's surprising they came here. People are typically older. It's where the elephants come to die. Well, the reason that she moved there, of course, was that she believed that she would fit in, that she was an A-lister, like some of the A-listers that stay and live there. And therefore, in the circumstances, she believed that she would fit in. Interesting that he says that you don't see much of them. Of course, this may well be that they're elsewhere, or they're just tucked away, busy flushing 47,000 toilets each day. That would probably take up a large part of your day. Undeterred by the Sussex's lack of interest, he has now incorporated the information into a new edition of the personal travelogue and memoir, Get Off Your Street. He told the Monty Shit Show Journal, I've added one last chapter, trading through a sea of mud, describing the devastating mudslides in Monty Shit Show in January 2018. The natural disaster claimed 23 lives across Southern California, and Mr. McGinnity said, my neighbour, Roy Rota, who lived across the Hot Springs Creek from our home, was killed. If we had been home and opened our front door, we would both be dead as well. We live in Riven Rock, a neighbourhood of 34 homes surrounded by a thick stone wall surrounding 87 acres. This is where Stanley McCormick lived for 40 years. But half of this beautiful estate, which Stanley created, turned to a sea of mud on January the 9th, 2018. 4 homes were completely destroyed. Our home took a big hit. Mud entered the rear of the house and disseminated our office, entry hall and back bedroom. There were boulders so large in the rooms, our contractor had to chisel them apart in order to remove them. I found a TV from the office and a mattress near our front gate 500 feet away. Can you imagine the fury of that mudslide? Mr. McGinnity says the estate, including the chateau-style mansion purchased by Harry and Harry's wife for £11.4 million 2 years later, was left looking like a sea of mud, or a moonscape. A bit of history from Mr. McGinnity about the floods and also that he'd made certain films, but Harry's wife wasn't interested. She doesn't even maintain the pretense because there was no need for the facade because it was only Mr. McGinnity, and therefore he was asserted control over by her staying in a position of withdrawal and haughtily and dismissing him, demonstrating once again her lack of emotional empathy. She quite simply is rude. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.